He's written thrillers about Israel and international showdowns in the Middle East. But in his new book, best-selling author Joel Rosenberg is focusing on the past and one of the darkest chapters in world history. Take a look.
During World War II, 11 million people were rounded up and taken to concentration camps all over Europe. 6 million of these were Jews, and an estimated 1 million of them died here at Auschwitz, the Nazi concentration camp complex in Poland. Inspired by true stories of those who were captured and sent to the death camps, Joel C. Rosenberg's new novel, The Auschwitz Escape, gives a glimpse of the horrors that existed behind those prison walls and the courage needed not only to survive a death camp, but to break free and tell the world the truth.
Well, the book is called The Auschwitz Escape. Joel Rosenberg is such a popular author. He's the thrillers, every one of them, and this is his latest. And, you know, Joel, I was in Munich and drove up to Dachau and went through that thing that said, you know, work makes free, and then I began to see the pictures and the things. But that moved me, but I understand something happened to you when you saw Auschwitz that just overwhelmed you.
It did. I mean, I went and visited the Nazi death camp in southern Poland in November of 2011. I'd never been. Yeah. This is true about anybody, but it's certainly true about a Rosenberg, a Jewish man standing in a gas chamber, looking at ovens and knowing that it's surreal to be able to stand there in freedom today, but all that had happened. What I learned as I was leaving the camp after we'd had the tour was that over 800 people had tried to escape. Admitted, you know, of course, everyone would want to have, but only a handful got out. And I got intrigued. I had never heard that anybody had gotten out.
I hadn't either.
And I began to do the research.
Yeah.
It turns out that 7 years ago next month, the first 2 of 4 men not only escaped, but they escaped for 2 different reasons. Partly to save their own lives, of course, but partly to warn the Jewish communities and the Allies what was really happening, that these were not labor camps, slave labor camps. They were extermination camps. And the more I read, the more fascinated I got, and I thought, I don't know this history. I don't know most people who know this history. So I decided to write a novel that would be based on fact, inspired by these true stories, but would take you into this world. And it is probably the most painful and difficult process to write this particular novel, but I think the history is so important and relevant to today.
What did you learn? You know, I remember Dachau. They had pictures, and they were hanging the Jews from poles. And one of the most painful things in the world is to have your hands behind you, and they were suspending from their hands, wrenching their shoulders out, and that was just one of the things they were doing. And of course, you saw the ovens where they were burning them. What did you? These 2 people? How did they get out, and who were they, and what's the story?
Well, it was extraordinary. Rudolf Verba and Fred Wetzler. Now, Verba actually is a name that he took later. His name was really Walter Rosenberg, which I learned in my research. No relation that I'm aware of, but I feel in a kindred spirit to him. The next 2 were Arnost Rosen and Czesław Mordowitz. But these 4 men, they were all Jews, and they developed an ingenious plot. And how they got out, I'm not going to tell you. But I took exactly how they did it, and I created some fictional characters who come alongside them, in a sense, and help them get out and then escape. I did change their names because I didn't want to put words or thoughts into the mouths of these heroes that I couldn't verify to really be true. So I changed their names, but as a part of this book tour, and certainly on your show, I wanted to start telling these names. Rudolf Verba, Fred Wetzler, Arnost Rosen, and Czesław Mordowitz. They pulled off the greatest escapes in all of human history from a Nazi death camp. And the report that they wrote of the eyewitness accounts of what they were seeing, what was really happening, 1 million people, Jews being killed, wound up on the desk of Churchill, wound up on the desk of Franklin Roosevelt and their advisors. And they were pleading, liberate us, or bomb the tracks at least. Or if there's nothing else that can be done, bomb the camps.
Well, did the Allies believe that? Did Churchill believe it?
It took a long time for them to process this. Now, you know, in their defense, to a degree, they were right as these guys got out. they were finishing the plans for D-Day, you know, which were coming up on that 70th anniversary. It wasn't like they had extra time. They were trying to liberate. So there's an intense debate. Did we do enough? Now, Auschwitz was bombed. One of the factories that the slave labor population were working in, they did get bombed by the Americans. So it's not clear why didn't the Americans go back. We could have done it.
Yeah.
A bigger issue was that the Jews that got out, they weren't just trying to say, hey, we're telling you of a story that has happened. They had heard rumors that the Hungarian Jewish population were going to be deported to Auschwitz, Birkenau, the expansion camp. And that hadn't happened yet. That was almost 500,000 Jews that had not yet been murdered. And these guys wanted to say, don't get on these trains. You're not just going to become slaves. You're going to be walked right off the train, right into these gas chambers. They were able to help stop that, although 300,000 people already went before people woke up and realized what was happening.
Did you have a chance to see the actual words that they wrote, the papers that they drafted?
Yes, I went to the Yad Vashem Research Memorial Center in Israel. They took me down into their vaults, 3 layers of security, of massive doors like a bank, and they showed me copies of the actual documents and the sketches of the camps. They provided so much research. Anything I get wrong in this is not their fault. I have tried. But there's one other story that I wove into this because I thought, where's the hope?
Yeah.
Right? Yes, they got out. Yes, they helped save lives. But there's a little town in southern France called Le Chambon. It's a little Protestant village in a largely Catholic country. I discovered in my research that the pastors in that town started seeing Jews come to their doorsteps saying, we've got to escape, and would you help us? And they decided to rescue these Jews, and they rallied their whole town of Le Chambon, 3,000 people. They ended up saving more than 5,000 people. Most of them were Jews, and most of them were children. When the war was over, the state of Israel actually recognized the entire town and these pastors as righteous Gentiles. And what's interesting is every single one of the pastors was arrested by the Gestapo during the war, sent to concentration camps, 2 of which were murdered. So I created a fictional assistant pastor, a younger man, who's working with these leaders, and he gets arrested and taken to Auschwitz, and I weave him into the story. So you see the hope of this town and the courage of this believer who gets asked, why are you here? All the Jews are saying, what are you doing here? And he says, why aren't all the Christians here?
Joel, the Nazis were great on retaliation. If somebody killed a SS officer, they would shoot 100 villagers. That's right. When those guys escaped, what was the retaliation, or was there any?
There was. If you escaped, they took people that they would round up anyone they thought might be connected, and they shot them. But these men thought we're dying anyway. If we stay, so to save 100 lives, we're risking 1 million lives. Maybe if people really knew, how could they leave us here if they know what's happening? They must not know. Now, there's a big historical debate that maybe, because there have been other reports that had gotten out, and the world had not taken it seriously because in part they couldn't imagine it.
Well, wasn't there a movie made about this, about these guys?
There was a documentary made by PBS.
Yeah, I think I saw
and
that.
I think it would be an amazing movie. Absolutely, it should be done as a major blockbuster. But no, at this point, most are hidden, forgotten, if they were ever known stories.
We all try to wonder how a nation that had the Christian background, that Germany, how they could have been sucked up into this delusion and ignored it. That was what was so terrible. Did you find anything in the German psyche that led to this horror that took place?
If I boiled it down, I would say a catastrophic failure of discipleship. You had 45 million Protestants, as an example, in Germany. When Hitler took over, he took over the church. As you know, the Reich Church, they banned the Bible, they banned the cross, they banned the preaching of the gospel, they put the pastors in prison. Dietrich Bonhoeffer went to a concentration camp, was hanged. He had to create an underground seminary to keep the gospel alive, to keep the word of God being preached. But a lot of Protestants either opted for the Reich Church or thought, well, you can't buck the system. And yet men were heroic in the fact that they did. And the question raises for us today, just as an example, 55 million children have been murdered by abortion in our country.
That's right.
We're getting close to 60 million in the next year or two. That would be, if we get to 60 million, we will have killed 10 times more Americans than the Nazis killed of the Jews. Now, we know the judgment that came on Nazi Germany, and we feel like it was, correct, it was just. What do we think is going to happen? And this story is not just about how it applies to us or abortion. It's Rwanda, it's Sudan, it's Syria, it's Bosnia. There are cruel, inhumane things happening, and the question is, what are we going to do as believers, as well as our country? Now, we're got a lot of problems with our own government and the weakness that I think we're seeing in foreign policy. In Iran, they're getting close. They're saying we're going to wipe out the Jews.
That's right.
And we're building nuclear weapons. And they're not saying they're building nuclear weapons, but they obviously are.
Doing it, certainly.
We did a new poll. We just found, and we're about to release it, but I'll tell it to you here first. 80% of Americans now believe that if Iran gets nuclear weapons, their intent is to bring about a second Holocaust. That's the language we tested in Israel, trying to kill all 6 million Jews in Israel. But over 70% believe that a nuclear Holocaust will happen here, that Iran mostly wants to hit us.
That's right.
And you and I know that. Many of your viewers instinctively believe that. And yet, not only our own government, but the leaders of the world seem not to be taking decisive action to deal with the evil that is rising in Iran right now.
We're so worried about the next election. We're worried about the next paycheck. We're worried about the benefits from the government. Ladies and gentlemen, I just commend this book to you. It's The Auschwitz Escape. Joel is a great writer, and what he has said here is something that you ought to read, and this is available in Amazon. We got it here.
All bookstores around the country. CBN has it as well. And
all right.
You can go to my website, joelrosenberg.com.
It's a compelling cover and a great author. Joel, thank you so much. God bless you.
God bless you. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy birthday.
And I'm getting there, man.
Well, amen.
I was reading about Joshua today. He passed on at 110, so I've got a few more years to go.
Bless you.